'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello and welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast. My name is Rich Natoli. I'm hosting the show today. And today I am joined by Captain Jason Clark from In the Slot Inshore Fishing in Cedar Key, Florida. Captain Jason, how you doing today?
Good, Rich. How about yourself?
I'm doing really well. We're fortunate that we get to talk to you because you have some bad weather today. And
Yes.
It's keeping you off the water. I have some mixed weather today, which has kept me off the water. So it just works out. And I'm really glad that you can be here. And I'm really looking forward to talking about some fishing in your area. But before we get started, I want to just see, do you want to just kind of go through your contact information, your website, where you're fishing out of, and just give us a brief overview of In the Slot Inshore Fishing?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Rich said, my name's Captain Jason Clark with In the Slot Fishing Charters out of Cedar Key, Florida. My website's www.intheslotfishing.com. Same with all my social media tags. It's just at In the Slot Fishing. And if anybody need to reach me personally, my number is 352-639-3209. And talking about my charter, I started this probably a little over a decade ago at this point. Just on a whim, always loved taking people fishing, and got with my wife one day and told her I think I wanted to try and do this full time. And she has supported me since day one. And now she's a stay-at-home mom of our three kids, and I do a lot of inshore fishing.
That's great. That's great. I was looking at your site, and I have to say, I love your boat. That is one heck of a fishing platform that you have going on there. You want to tell everybody a little bit about that and how that works in your area?
So the main one I run out of right now is a 24 Sea Fox powered with a 300 Yamaha on the back of it. It's a bay boat design, and the reason I ended up actually settling going for a bay boat versus a flat bottom is the first few years I ran out of a lot of Carolina skiffs and just a whole bunch of flat bottom boats. And Cedar Key's location, just being slightly off of Florida, puts us in a really tight area for bad wind. And chop and flat bottom boats don't go hand in hand. So we're fairly shallow. So I went out and I did a lot of research on bay boats, and went for the Sea Fox because factory draft, I think they put it at like 12 or 13 inches. Now I throw on a jack plate on that, obviously, and I know my area, so I know where I can get away with hitting a little bit of bottom from time to time if need be. But in all honesty, the difference between like a 6 or 7 inch draft with a flat bottom versus a 12 or 13 inch draft with a bay boat hasn't affected me in the slightest. It's actually been a lot more comfortable for my clients on choppy days, and that's probably the biggest compliment I get on the water. Is, wow, we're going straight into this chop, and it doesn't hurt like the other guide we went out with.
I used to have a flat bottom boat and a Carolina skiff, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, that'll take a toll on your knees. If you happen to be trying to take a drink while you're driving, you hit that swell or you hit that chop, your teeth are clanking together. It can be very unpleasant, but man, I love that boat, and I can see exactly why you have it, because that thing is going to draw very little, and it is just going to slice through that chop. And
it does. Have you ever? We've got a couple guides that have probably been guiding as long as I've been alive, and they all tell the same story that when they were my age, they didn't walk hunchback, but after 20 years in a flat bottom boat, they've got to walk hunchback now. So I'm trying to avoid that if I can.
Yeah, it'll do it, man. It'll absolutely pound you. And you've got, look, like you said, in your location, you've got a lot of wind consideration there, because you're not always going to be able to duck out of it, and you've got to make some runs in order to get to where you want to go.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk right now. It's look, we're recording this in the last week of July. So we're coming up on August fishing. And that's going to look, it's like any other month of the year. Every month is different. There's different conditions. There's different expectations. In your area, the Big Bend area at Cedar Key, what are you looking for late July, well, let's just say August fishing? What's really going to be the focus for you and for your charters?
Okay. So August, it's definitely one of the hottest months out of the year. Anybody who lives in Florida knows that. Primarily, I switch focus from trout and reds to basically reds and snook. I go after big fish. It's a lot of just has to do with the water temperature. And every once in a while, especially on the redfish, if you're in Florida, you should know, redfish spawn September through December. And every once in a while, we start getting those schools a little bit early. And I count on that about the second week of August. And I can tell you right now in July, Saturday, we pulled up on a bank and there was a school of about 30 or 40 redfish on it. And we picked about 8 of them in, I'd say, 15, 20 minutes.
Wow.
So the schools are starting to show up. So we definitely like to do a lot of school fishing in the hotter months. And they stay shallow for us, too. It's not one of those, it's not like the trout that go out into the deep water when that water gets up there in the, high 80s, low 90s. The other day I had a day we were fishing on 93.2 degree water temperatures in 3 feet. But when it comes to targeting the reds and snook in the hotter months, I do my least favorite style of fishing, but it pays off. I do a lot of bait and weight. We throw chunk mullet out there and we have good conversation and we wait on a rod to bend over. I've got a few clients that have already booked for me and they do it every August. It's their right before school starts back trip. And they don't care to bait and weight. So we'll switch over to gold spoons. We'll throw some paddle tails early. If it's calm, we'll do top water in the mornings. All that seems to work too. But if I have to choose a technique for August, I like to just bait and wait. And I'm a very impatient guide, so my waiting might only be 10 or 15 minutes. As to where I see some people who can hang out on a bar for 45 minutes to an hour, and I'm bad at that. So I like to move. I feel if they're not biting in the first 10, 15 minutes, they're probably not there.
Yeah, I'm more like you. I'm extremely impatient, and I go fishing with a lot of people, a lot of different people, and one of the species up here in the Mid-Atlantic that is really, I guess, the popular one right now, it's the trendy fish, is the sheep's head. Okay. And man, I'll tell you right now, I just don't have the patience for it. I love catching them, but I'll go out with these guys and I'm thinking I'm going multi-species. So, we don't have the redfish up here that you have. We don't have speckled trout really in any numbers. So we're really limited to weak fish, flounder, and sheep's head in the summer. And they'll go out, we'll head out at 7 a.m., 6 a.m. And I'm on a kayak and we'll go to a bridge and they'll just start fishing and I'll start fishing. 20 minutes later, I'm out. I'm done. Yep. It doesn't even matter if I'm catching them. I'm out. I'm moving on to something else. I'm now fishing for flounder. And, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when I come back by the bridge, they're still there. I can't do it. It's so I'm like you. I understand the impatience, but let's talk a little bit about the bait, using the natural baits, because I think that's one thing that a lot of people, I don't know what it is, but they think that you shouldn't use natural baits. And to me, that doesn't make really any sense. It can sometimes be the difference between a skunk or just a really slow grind of a day and a productive day. So what is it about the baits that you think really helps out in the summertime?
So for me, I think a lot of it, first I'll touch on, using natural bait versus not using natural bait. And, as a guide, we're being paid to put people on fish and to have a good time. So I feel as a guide, you've got to use whatever you need to put people on fish and make sure they have a good time. But we don't get clientele every day that can go out there and throw a paddle tail and throw it properly, or throw top water, jerk shad, anything like that. So, a lot of it just turns into, okay, I need to do something where this person thinks this person's having fun and they're actually doing the work versus me getting up on the bow of the boat, casting, catching a fish and handing a rod over. I want them to get the full experience. So natural bait comes in handy a lot just for that point of it, as, okay, I'm not going to spend an hour of this 4-hour trip teaching you and taking an hour away from your fishing kind of deal.
Right.
Now, natural bait in the summertime, I really think a lot of it just has to do with how hot the water gets. Fish aren't much different than you and me. I don't plan on going outside when it's 95 degrees and running as fast as I can to McDonald's to get a meal. I want to get something close by and stay in my comfort zone. And I feel like fish do that too. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but it's worked for me for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
So summertime, we get a lot of mullet. The shrimp kind of goes away. We don't get much shrimp at the bait stores. Shrimp's hard to come by on a cast net on this side. And cut mullet, it's what's there for us. Some guides go out and get a thread fin as well. I primarily stick to mullet, just cast net 7 or 8 at the beginning of the day, and I chunk it up into chunks. And we just throw it out there and let that smell get in the water and maybe entice them a little bit. Same way a barbecue might entice us to actually get up and go do something.
Yeah.
And it's worked for me for 10 plus years of being a guide and 30 plus years of fishing Cedar Key.
And that's all that matters, right? As you mentioned, and that's one of the things you mentioned it. And I think that's my big issue with people that they say you shouldn't ever use bait or you have to always use artificials. It's but what's catching? If I'm catching them, I don't care how. I'm one of those guys. I don't care. You want to use a fly rod, use a fly rod. Yep. If it's not working, you should drop the fly rod and you should pick up the spinning rod. If the spinning rod's not working, you should pick up the bait caster. If the plastics, bait, it doesn't matter to me. As long as that's a tight line and I'm catching the fish, I feel like that's the goal. I think sometimes we lose sight of that as anglers, right? It's like, well, I did this and who cares? Did you catch a fish or not?
I'm still guilty about doing it for tournaments. Anytime I go fish for myself, I will have a lure in mind, and I'm like, I'm not going to put this lure down until I catch a fish. Well, after watching my buddy catch 5 or 6 fish, and I haven't caught anything, my lure gets put down. But that's just comes with more age and experience, and I guess less patience too, probably.
Yeah, I don't know why we do that, but we do. We all do it. I do it. You do it. Yeah, it's just natural, I guess. But so let's talk real quick. In the summertime, are you using different gear when you're throwing? Let's say I came down for a charter. And you said, "Look, we're going to throw some natural baits." And then in the afternoon, for whatever reason, we're going to throw artificials. Are you using the same gear for both of those outside of the hooks and the baits? Are you using the same rods and reels and everything?
A lot of times that answer is yes, especially on my pop and cork rods. I used to have a few guides make fun of me because I'm probably one of the only people on the planet that float mullet underneath a pop and cork from time to time. But I do, and it works. So if let's say, for instance, we're going out and the tide in the morning time, 7 a.m., it's good for trout fishing. And we go out and we throw some pop and corks and some paddle tails under the pop and corks for the day, catch our trout. Tide gets a little bit higher, oyster beds get covered up, and okay, hey, let's go find some redfish and snook. Absolutely, I will. I mean, I'm using jig heads under those pop and corks. I'm not using circle hooks.
Right.
So I'll take that soft plastic off. I'll switch over if we got shrimp we want to throw on them. I'll just put shrimp right on that jig head, throw it out there around the oyster beds. I will float pop and corks or cut mullet under a pop and cork if I'm on a real rocky area and I've got those people that just can't seem to keep that bait going with the current without getting hit. So then I'll cut a leader a little bit shorter and just let it float over the rocky area. And I've caught so many fish doing that. And I've got a few guides so like we can't figure it out. Like we just can't do it. I'm like, hey, it works. Like, but no, I will throw Carolina rigs and stuff like that for redfish as well and snook around the around the oyster beds and bars. So I'll
Okay.
switch to that. If I've got people who want fast action, I will switch over to, gold spoons and whatnot. But for the most part, yeah, I can use the exact same rod and reel for almost everything that I want to accomplish in Cedar Key.
That's great. I personally use the same rod and reel for pretty much everything. From everything from 50-inch striped bass all the way down to little flounder,
That's
which would be 15 inches and up. If you get the right one, it's not perfect for everything, but it works for everything.
Right.
So that's the only specialty rods that I have are for tog, and sheep's head. And the sheep's head one is just because I don't like using that rod for anything else. It's just my cheap rod that if it breaks on a bridge piling, I'm not going to cry.
Exactly.
So, all right. So you're using the same equipment there. So let's talk a little bit, let's say somebody's coming out with you and you're talking to them about the spots you want to target, generally speaking, for August redfish, and then after that, let's talk snook, because they're probably different, I'm guessing. But let's talk about what are the types of things that you're looking for in this hot weather, the hot waters, when you're targeting these summer redfish in August.
Okay. First thing's probably what every angler looks for is signs of life. Whether that be from mullet jumping or seeing a stingray on the bottom or a turtle popping up, because we have a lot of sea turtles in Cedar Key this time of year. So turtles are a big indicator that there's, for whatever reason, there's movement around there. But signs of life, definitely the first thing. Summertime, our redfish, they're not going to be necessarily deep in the creeks anymore. They're going to go out around the islands. We've got 4 main islands around Cedar Key that we fish. If you ever look at us on a map, so they kind of leave the backcountry and they're out there a little bit cooler water. If you, for example, right now, morning time, you're looking about 87-degree water around the islands. Back in the creeks, it's about 89 to 90 at the same time frame. Just different between bottom and how shallow everything is, and water movement and current flow. So signs of life, and these redfish love bars around our area. You don't throw in the mangroves for them. We don't really have that around the islands. You've got oyster beds, and that's what these redfish are on. As that water comes up, they'll move more and more in there to feed on whatever crustaceans going across there, whether it be little crabs, bait fish, anything like that. But first and foremost, definitely signs of life, and then the structure that I'm looking for. And it doesn't really change in the summertime. It's if they're on oyster bars and shell bars, that's what they're going to be on. You don't really, like I said, you're not trying to snook fish. You're not throwing them up in mangroves, 2 feet in mangroves, and hitting a root system with every cast. You're just hanging around oyster beds.
I think one of the coolest things that you just said, I actually am a little disappointed you said it, because I haven't really talked with people about this, but the turtles.
Okay.
Where I fish, I always use the turtles as an indication of where there's bait, because where I fish, it's, shallow water to me is 10 feet. You can't see any, and it's murky water. So you cannot see if there's bait there unless you're using your fish finder and have it tuned to the bait fish. But I always kind of key in on turtles as one of the really, really good indicators. And I never told anyone that.
Oh, wow.
So people say, well, there's a lot of turtles, and I get excited. I'm like, yeah, there are. But I don't mention anything. So you just gave out one of my secrets. I love it.
Sorry about that. Another little thing we look for, especially when it comes to like cobia fishing in the summertime, is manatees.
I've never seen a manatee. I've never fished an area in Florida. I've only fished Florida once in my life. Never seen a manatee, but that's an interesting one as well. I've seen a lot of videos of them scaring people coming up next to them.
Oh no, I get so one manatee doesn't get me excited, but when I see like a dozen manatees and it's the middle of June, July, or August when the cobia are running through our area, those cobia will actually get underneath the manatees, and we're talking 4 feet of water. So that turns into trim the motor up, put the trolling motor down, and you start trolling around all these manatees, and you'll see these big 3 to 4 foot cobia just swimming underneath them in 4 feet of water. And I personally throw a 9-inch rubber eel.
Yeah.
And if they're not going to hit a rubber eel, they're not going to hit anything.
Right.
You can forget about it. I used to throw chunk bait at them and shrimp at them. And the only issue I ever ran into with that, throwing natural bait, was all the remoras that are stuck to the manatees will come off the manatee and get that bait, but they're less likely to chase the rubber eel for whatever reason.
Oh, it's interesting. We run into the problem up here. So cobia fishing, I'll use New Jersey as an example. Our cobia fishing is all offshore, near shore. So we're in 60, 80 feet of water. And, if you see rays, if you see a lot of sharks, they're usually around the sharks, spinners or black tips. If you see a sea turtle, that type of thing. And the biggest problem when you're using the natural baits is the sharks. So you throw it out there and you have just as much shot at getting a shark as you do, a much better chance at getting a shark than you do one of the cobia that's there. But man, throwing an eel out there, especially a large one, you'll still get the sharks. They'll still go after it, but that's a great tip. And I think that's a universal tip for cobia.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely. They're rarely in a spot where it's just them. There's always something else.
There's either turtles around them. I've pulled them off of turtles before. I've never seen cobia truly by themselves. Yeah. I've had a few bycatches where I wasn't expecting a cobia while drifting the grass flats. But even then, there's still all kinds of life around them. There's rays, there's other fish. I've never just truly seen a cobia just swim by my boat by itself going, oh. They're usually attached to something one way.
Yeah, I saw a cool picture yesterday. It was last night. It was on social media, and I was looking at pictures from a drone in North Carolina, and it was showing rays and sharks and everything all around the swimmers, which is always entertaining. But then I found another post, and it was showing 3 cobia underneath a big ray, just going right up the beach. And it was amazing. I mean, these things were, they were as long as this huge ray. So we're talking one ray holding 3 huge cobia in about 3 feet of water. It was amazing.
That's awesome. And man. You're talking about 3 feet of water. That's my fishery. You made the comment earlier that you fish, shallows 10 feet of water and murky. Well, Cedar Key, it's 3 feet of water and murky because we don't have that clear water. When we're seeing anything go on, it's always surface activity.
Gotcha. Okay.
We have, if you've never been to Cedar Key before, we have 2 major freshwater rivers on both sides of us, on either side of us. We've got the Swanee River north of us, which is massive. I mean, it runs all the way through Georgia. And then we have the Wakasasa River just to the east of us, not 10 miles. So we always keep so much fresh water dump one way or the other from the wind blowing it to us. We get maybe 3 months out of the year where you have visibility in 4 feet of water. Other than that, we're fishing tea most of the time.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to what I'm fishing. It's always tannic, tea, whatever. And, I never really, for me, clear as I can see 4 feet. That's really clear,
Yeah, that's really clear for us too. If we can,
so it's about the same then. Yeah, I remember once in my life, one summer where we could see 30 feet to the bottom off of the coast. 1 year, I'm 50. So
I don't think I've ever seen 30 feet clear in Cedar Key.
It was crazy. I'll tell you what, man. It was insane. I was only a teenager then, but I'm out on the boat and we're dropping the baits, and we are literally, now you could tell there was something down there, but you couldn't tell the species. So we were literally visually sight fishing from 30 feet up off of the beaches in southern New Jersey. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And it's something I've never experienced again. But let's stop talking about that. We're coming close. We got like 6 minutes left. But I really want to talk about the snook too, because you are targeting snook. Let's talk about the spots that you're targeting them when you're heading out in August.
Okay. So you're going to laugh, but it's almost the same spots as the redfish. Because, I talked about how Cedar Key doesn't have a whole lot of mangrove action to begin with. And we are really far north for snook. Like we just started. I mean, I remember I caught my first snook ever when I was a teenager in Cedar Key, but it was maybe 12 inches. And I was super excited as, somebody was probably 13 or 14. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a snook in my life. But over the last 5 years or so, Cedar Key there's more and more snook coming. And we haven't had the massive freezes in the wintertime to take them out. But this time of year, this is when they're spawning. Summertime, that's why the season's closed for us in the summertime. It's when they spawn. And when they get done deeper, and I can talk about deeper as well. I mean, I will take some near shore trips and go out into 20 feet of water and just chunk some pinfish down there on some structure that's about 7 miles offshore. And you'll find a lot of spawners out there in some of these areas. And I don't try to reinvent the wheel when I'm offshore, near shore fishing for them. It's usually just chunking pinfish down there on a circle hook and waiting for someone to knock it. A lot of times it's a snook. Sometimes it's a Goliath grouper that you're not going to get back.
Right.
But when they do come inshore again, and the way I've always seen it is they always seem to be in 2s or 3s and sometimes 4. It's usually one big female that's, 35, 40 inches. And then there's always seems to be 2 males with them, like 22, 20-inch fish, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah. But all I'm doing, snook-like fast action. They will pick up a cut mullet when I'm red fishing. The last one I caught was, or a client caught, was 34 inches. And we were actually red fishing with cut mullet on the bottom. And that drag started to scream. And I said, that's not a redfish.
No.
And 5 minutes later, we had a 34-inch snook in the boat. But jerk baits, I like throwing. Color doesn't matter, in my opinion, when it comes to snook. I think it's just something fast and you get in front of their face. And it doesn't matter if the water is 80 degrees. It doesn't matter if the water is 90 degrees. They have no problem chasing it. I always made the joke that redfish are like bodybuilders and snook are like CrossFit athletes. They, they act a little bit different. But here lately, I've just been throwing a whole bunch of like 5 to 7 inch split tails or flukes or jerk baits, whatever you want to call them. And that works great when you see them in the area or you have an idea that they're around those oyster beds or close to the tree lines. That's what we'll start trolling those tree lines. And I tell my guys all the time, retrieve it fast. Don't hesitate with it too much. They will chase you to this boat. And most of the time, with as dirty as our water is, it's kind of an advantage for us because they don't spook as easy as they do in clear water. Clear water, you want to stay a good amount of ways from. Some people tell me they stay 40 to 50 feet away from them. In our murky water, if I just happen to see one roll on the top, I can get you in, 20, 25 foot cast.
Yeah.
Without spooking them, trolling motor down, just coming up slow on them. And just get that jerk bait or spoon. The slam shadies work really well on them. Anything you can throw that's fast seems to be good for snook, at least in my opinion, in my experience.
And are you looking for, is there anything that's special about the spot? So it's very similar to the reds, but are you looking more current, less current, or is the current really not a consideration for the snook?
Because it's still, within the last 5 years of us really getting them thick, I honestly haven't noticed too much of a difference. I do think current plays a little bit into it, especially when that current's ripping. Yeah. I feel like I get actually a better snook bite, right? Believe it or not. But for the most part, them and the reds seem to kind of go hand in hand in Cedar Key. I can't tell you how many times I've had a double up and one be a redfish and one be a snook.
Man.
I mean, and we don't have those long mangrove lines like Southern Florida does that they go hiding. They hang out there around the same islands the redfish do. I mean, it's just, and I will say one thing that is a little bit different. Early July, mid-July, when they're coming back in from near shore, big drop-offs right before they get to the structure. Right. So if you've got an oyster bed 50 yards in front of you and 20 yards behind you, there's actually a drop off where it goes from 2 feet to 6 feet. Start on that drop off. There's really nothing there except for the drop off, but for whatever reason, those snooks seem to like hanging out with that bait that's at that drop off.
Yeah,
I don't think the bait likes hanging out there though.
No, it's trying to get up into the oyster bars as soon as there's enough water.
Yes, sir.
It's very similar, and I've heard this comparison to the striped bass fishing up here. You know, they kind of, the snook kind of act and behave in a similar fashion. And if I'm going for striped bass, I'm going to that drop off first. I don't care if there's oysters nearby. I'm first checking any drop off, any significant change in depth, because they just love ledges. I don't know what it is. They just love it. They just love it.
And I've personally never striped bass fish, but I've heard the same comparison from clients I've had on the boat who've now done both. This is like fishing for a striped bass. I said, whatever you say, buddy. I don't know on that one for sure, but sounds like it's true. It's coming from you as well.
Yeah, well, so I haven't gone for snook ever. I've never fished in an area with snook, but it's the same thing as you. I've talked to people that have fished both, and their comparison is, no, the snook is actually much more closely aligned to a striped bass than you would think, which I never thought about that. And they said, no, it's very heavy structure oriented. It does really like the currents and ledges. So if you can find a ledge, and these are guys that they fish every year, both up here in New Jersey, Delaware, New York, and then down in Florida. And they've got the pictures to prove it. So yeah, they use their striped bass mind when they're
that's awesome.
Snook. Yeah. Yeah. But that said, I got to get a snook on my board at some point.
Come on down to Florida. We got plenty of them.
My wife keeps telling me, we got to get down to Florida so you can catch these fish. I'm like, you don't want me to catch the fish. She's like, you can catch them over there. So, yeah. So we're actually up at our 30 minutes, but I want to make sure before we go, give your contact information again, if anyone wants to get out on the water with you. But before I do that, I want to let you know, if you are a member of the Salt Strong Insider Club, you're leaving reports in the community. So if you want to hear the reports around Cedar Key, just go into the community and look at the game plans, and you will see them in there from Captain Jason pretty much every week. Yep. And you'll get a good sense of what's going on, and you'll get a good sense of what you're missing if you're not fishing with them. So if you want to, Captain, why don't you go through one more time your contact information, where they can find you?
Absolutely. Again, my name's Captain Jason Clark. In the slot fishing charters out of Cedar Key, Florida. My website is intheslotfishing.com, and my phone number is 352-639-3209.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. I love learning about new areas to me, and I've never fished this area, although I've seen your reports for quite a while now, and it looks extremely interesting to me. You've got everything within a run of your launch. And
we're usually fishing in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah. And I see your pictures too. You're catching some really quality fish consistently. Man, there's nothing wrong with that. So thank you again for coming on, everyone. We will be back in a couple of days with the next episode. So until then, get out there, get on the water, and get some tight lines.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.